Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started, so if you would please take your seats. Welcome to the Early Literacy Always Matters session. Thank you. Good morning to this kind of chilly, windy day in Oklahoma City. I am Kim Yana Burke. I'm the Senior Policy Fellow for Early Literacy at ExcelinEd, and I am excited to be joined by my colleagues in this fight to ensure that children are reading by third grade. So I welcome you to this session. Again, Early Literacy matters and always matters. And we're going to talk a bit today about not just policy adoption, but also policy implementation. So a couple of years ago, ExcelinEd launched earlyliteracymatters.org. This website, in its first phase, included a state snapshot on the policies that have been adopted for each state according to ExcelinEd's fundamental principles. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Most recently, February of this year, we launched Early Literacy Matters 2.0, which focuses not only on policy adoption, but also policy implementation. Because the one thing that we do know is that passing a law is the first step, but implementation is key. You can have all of the right components, but making sure that it's being implemented and actually done on the ground in schools is what's key to improving student achievement. So today, I am joined by my esteemed panelists here. First, we have Dr. Tanette Smith, who is the Executive Director of Literacy Programs and Initiatives at the Maryland State Department of Education. We have Dr. Kate Brumley, who is the State Superintendent of Education for the Louisiana Department of Education. Dr. Kiffany Pride, Assistant Commissioner of Learning Services at the Arkansas Department of Education. And last but definitely not least, Dr. Katie Jenner, who is the Secretary of Education for the Indiana Department of Education. So before we, you want to clap for that? Of course you do. Of course we do. So I apologize in advance. I do have the sniffles. I'm from the South. It hasn't gotten really cold yet. I'm from Mississippi. So the wind has gotten taken a hold of me. So first, I just want to talk to you a little bit about Early Literacy Matters 2.0. In the last year, how many of you have visited this site? Fantastic. We're currently making updates. So for all of you who have been calling kind of threatening, like, listen, we've passed some legislation. We want to see it on your website. The updates will be made by February so that we can accurately reflect all of the great things that have happened during legislative sessions this year. But Early Literacy Matters, the homepage, really speaks to what our fundamental principles are. The comprehensive approach that we believe is needed in order to address the needs of our teachers and administrators, educator preparation programs, and also our students and our parents and families. So within our 18 fundamental principles of this comprehensive approach, we look at ways to empower educators through knowledge building. And again, not just teachers, but also administrators. That's extremely important. How we make sure that our educator preparation programs are aligned to the science of reading, and also ensure that their candidates are able to teach children how to read on day one through an assessment. The goal is to ensure that we kind of break this silo, that higher ed can begin to see themselves in K-12 outcomes, because how they prepare teachers directly impacts how they show up on day one. Funding is also important. There's nothing worse than an unfunded mandate. And if you're in a state with an unfunded mandate, just blink your eyes, don't raise your hand. We get it. We feel your pain. Also with our students, making sure that there are interventions that are being provided for those students, that those interventions are monitored, and that students are able to be identified early and provided with the supports that they need often. But what goes along with that is parental notification. How do we engage parents from the beginning, not just at the end of the school year when we feel that the child has not been doing well and may not pass to the 3rd grade? We want parents to be a part of the process from the very beginning. And the last thing I'll say about these Read by 3 laws, all across the country, now I think there are almost 40 states that have adopted Read by 3 policies. And the messaging is simple. This is not just a 3rd grade teacher's responsibility. And we have to message that. Our 3rd grade teachers, this is the first time that there's like the state accountability for state assessment, right? And there's a lot of pressure on 3rd grade teachers. But when we start in kindergarten, and in states that are fortunate enough to have state-funded pre-K, then we can identify students early and we can intervene and we can prevent reading difficulty in children. So we want to make sure that everyone understands that this is all of us, that this is not just 3rd grade, that this is what happens in kindergarten. You want to be able to say to the 1st grade teacher that I've gotten him or her ready for you, right? Better prepared teachers, better prepared students. So that's a part of our comprehensive approach. Now, very quickly on our website, it looks a bit different on the mobile device where you won't necessarily see the map, but the states are alphabetized. But on the website, you'll see the map. You can also filter the map by those principles that I just spoke about. Now you will see this key where once you filter the map, the states will show up, whether they're green, yellow, orange, or red. Fully implemented, not just adopted, but also fully implemented, partially implemented, future implementation, or principle not adopted at all. And then if you're looking for best practices at the bottom, then you can click on that and you can see some state examples that are fully implemented for each of the principles. And this is what populates. Once you click on the filter and you're looking for specific components or fundamental principles, then it will populate a heat map so that you can quickly identify those states that you may want to look more into, right? There are implementation analysis reports for each of those states on their solo state page. You can find their best practices, links to their documents. We do not have to recreate the wheel. This is an opportunity to identify these practices so that you can begin to share these in your state. So, with that lengthy introduction, I will begin to turn it to what you all are here for, which is to hear from our panelists. And I am going to start with you, Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith, I don't know if Dr. Wright is in here. Many of you know that Dr. Carrie Wright was the former state chief in Mississippi. She served us for 10 years and was very, very integral in our improvement in reading outcomes in our state. She moved back home to Maryland to serve as state chief, and then she stole Dr. Tanette Smith, who was with me at the Department of Education in Mississippi, to come and work with her. But I think you have a new title now, right?
Yeah, I do. And I'd like to say she recruited.
Okay, well, okay. I still feel away, but it's okay.
It's okay.
It's all right.
Yes, I am the interim deputy state superintendent for teaching and learning.
Yes.
So,
congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Okay, so Maryland recently passed policy around early literacy, but not the traditional pathway of policy that most states have taken. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your approach in Maryland?
So Maryland decided very strategically to circumvent, or no, I don't want to say circumvent. I think
we have some policymakers in here. Choose your words.
Okay, choose my words.
All right. All right.
It was strategic. So we decided to utilize policy instead of legislation, right? Policy gives us the ability to be more flexible in our thinking and to adjust our to the needs of the students in Maryland. We sought to put forth Dr. Carrie Wright's vision of literacy-focused instruction. Knowing that we had to focus on Tier 1 instruction, we really had to shore up what was going on in the classrooms within the state of Maryland to ensure that students had access to quality Tier 1 instruction. But not only that, there was already legislation and statutes in place that sort of provided some guardrails or some type of guidance for LEAs. We knew that we needed to provide additional supports to LEAs to shore up what they were providing for our kids. So we had the Ready to Read Act, which ensured that students were screened K through 2. Well, there were some loopholes in that, right? The statute said you don't have to screen everybody. If you screen them in kindergarten, you don't have to screen them again if they don't flag. So we knew that the policy that we developed needed to provide additional guardrails to ensure that all students were screened, kindergarten through 3rd grade. In addition, Maryland has legislation that says, or a statute in place that says that if students don't reach mastery in grades 2, 7, and I think it's 8, that they may be retained, or they may be provided with interventions. Well, some LEAs were not doing any of it, right? They were just pushing children along, and we knew that we had to put some things in place so that LEAs had a level of accountability, that parents were also afforded a level of control in what was happening with their kiddos. Many parents, I received hundreds of letters. We received over 2,000 pieces of feedback around this policy development. And many parents were really concerned that they knew their kiddos were struggling. They knew their kids weren't mastering the content, but they were continuously being pushed on without the mastery. And they were like, I want my kid to be retained because they're not ready to go on. And so this policy that we worked, we took 6 iterations, but 4 versions. The policy that we finally passed has, I think, a pretty different. It's an informed parent consent, right? So the parent has to be informed of the benefits and the risk of retention as well as promotion, and they have to decide whether they are willing to take those risks and push the kid on, or whether they choose to retain the kid and their child and receive additional supports. So we were very thoughtful in thinking through that, and we did use your Early Literacy Matters webpage.
Yes, you did. That's why
yes,
we're
we
here.
did.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll say this. So as you probably can tell, Tanette and I have known each other for 11 years now. We started the journey in Mississippi together with the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, and it's great to tell this story. A lot of times people think that it just comes together like that. So let's get a little real about this. What was the reaction from the public, from your other stakeholders, from your teachers?
Okay, let me just throw this script away that she sent like weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah.
So what's the real reaction for those states that are looking to adopt something like this, or for those states who are in early adoption? What happens with the stakeholders?
It depends on the context. I'm going to tell you. It really depends on the context. Maryland is a very, very blue state, right? And this policy, or policies such as this, are not.
Historically, right?
Historically, right? And so we had constituency groups across the board. Everyone had their own agenda. Everyone had their own opinion about certain components. And thus the 6 iterations and 4 versions. Right. Because in an effort to listen and hear what the constituents had to say, we wanted to make sure that we addressed their concerns without watering down the components of the policy. The big picture is that we want to make sure that we're screening kids. We want to make sure that we're providing interventions for students. We want to make sure that we're supporting teachers through professional learning. We want to make sure that we're supporting administrators so that they know what to look for when they go into classrooms. In addition, we want parents to feel empowered. And, of course, we want to make sure that there's accountability across the board. I think it's important that we have a level of transparency within the state. We share this information. And So within that policy, we built in multiple layers of transparency as well as reporting, which I think was missing in some of the, we put it on a website, but no one ever really looked at it. Yeah, I want to disaggregate this data. I want to break it down. I want to look at it, dig deeply into it so that we can find out where those gaps are and assist those LEAs who have those big gaps in student performance, especially within those student populations that are most at risk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your work. I want to switch to Dr. Jenner now. Indiana has had literacy policy for quite a while, but this legislative session this year was really kind of historic. So talk to us about why you decided that this was the right time to strengthen some of the efforts that you already had in statute and really kind of what that process was like.
Yeah, so we started, as most of you do as leaders, with the data. And then we casted our vision, and then we had to figure out how to get that vision moving. So starting with the data, level setting with you, walking in 4 years ago, pandemic was going, we were full force trying to get all of our schools open. Most of rural Indiana was open. Urban struggled a bit to get open, so that was priority. But we also, priority was also, as quickly as possible, we needed to understand where kids were. So our assessment data right out of the gate that spring showed 1 in 5 Indiana students was not able to read by the end of 3rd grade. When we put that data and looked at it longitudinally, a lot of people wanted to point to the pandemic as, oh, it's because of that, it's because of that. Mm-hmm. But if you look longitudinally in Indiana, we had a decade of decline in reading data, a decade. And I mention that because when we did a major policy push, it was over a decade ago, but it all depends on, you've got to keep your foot on the gas as a leader, as a locally or at the state level. And I think that we just backed off of the gas a bit. So the vision, huge compliments to Kimyana. I mean, she answered my cell phone call every time I called you. Sometimes I was in a heated room with legislators. I'm looking around to see if any of you are in here, and I'm like, let me just call Kimyana. Speakerphone,
I was getting my hair done one Saturday morning under the dryer.
I got to call Kimyana. I told you all. I told you most of my phone friends are like in this room. So Kimyana and the Mississippi Miracle was so helpful because that is a proof concept. They were last in the nation and jumped to 21st in the nation.
Yes.
And it's sustained. So as a state, we're like, well, we're just going to copy it and try it. Right. So that's really, that was the crux of our design. The third big area, as I mentioned, is the how. How do you get this done? Well, you all know the how certainly starts with strategies and tactics. The how also starts with allies.
Yes.
And funding, and empowering more people other than the room, the state, to really drive the change. So in terms of building allies, Sold a Story was like a gift that hit all of us. I remember the legislative session. I had Ed Delaney, who is a big Democrat in Indiana, and Aaron Freeman, who's at this conference somewhere, who's a big Republican. The same 24 hours, they came to me and said, have you listened to that Sold a Story? It's really good. And I was like, okay, we have something here. Like we're all hearing this. So that was huge in building allies. The funding, Lilly Endowment gave us a major funding investment, and then our General Assembly also added several million. So we had the largest literacy investment in the history, $170 million to drive this change. So we had the money, we had people who were believing in it, and really, I think the straw that broke the camel's back in a good way, we had to get the parents on board, because some of the laws that we doubled down on is, why are we sending thousands of students forward who can't read? We just keep sending them on. Yeah. And we're testing them in 10th grade. Guess what? They still are struggling to read. Yeah. So we, meaning team members, built a heat map of Indiana. It's available. You can go see it online. Shows it's a heat map of where just on reading, where kids are reading, where they're struggling, where they're not reading by the end of the third grade, where we're sending them on. What we realized is we're sending thousands and thousands of students forward without being able to read. And so our question was, then we've got to figure out how to support current teachers, future teachers, because the support starts there. Mississippi model, I could go on. But so many people in this room, and I think a lot of the reading work was birthed, the proof of concept was birthed in Mississippi. And then the energy and the momentum as a country came right here from this conference in launching that policy in multiple states.
Yes, thank you. I do have one other question. So let's talk about your ban on 3Qing.
I hate that word. Ban?
Yes.
Yes.
Prohibit.
You want to talk about
like
it?
all the things.
So when
How was it received?
Yeah. So when ExcelinEd, when you came out and you were like, one of our policy focuses, we're going to ban. I immediately was like, yeah, we're not going to do that in Indiana.
Connotation.
We're not right.
Yep.
But you were in the exact right place. If you know that something is not working for students, we've got to urgently stop doing that. So rather than going around the state and saying, we're going to ban this, we're going to prohibit this, we really tried to, and folks in Indiana know this, we tried to bring people to the table. And again, look at the heat map. Let's talk to teachers where it's working. Let's lift them up. And science of reading just absolutely was elevated to a point that it slowly, actually more fast than I thought, K-12 did not battle it. It was like, yep, we're doing science of reading. We're doing science of reading. The band battle, and Patricia mentioned this morning, was at the higher ed space.
Yeah.
I mean, you all, to the point that I would get calls, and it's kind of that slowed now too, but I would get calls, Kimiana, from people who'd be like, hey, I was in this college's course, and they are totally pushing us to learn how to teach kids to read using 3Qing. And I would hang up the phone, call the president of the university and the funder, because that's what drives things. You got to shut it down from where it started. The other thing with higher ed is, I sent a letter with our commissioner of higher ed to every president, provost, and dean of education in the state of Indiana, and said, here's our why going forward. We have to make sure kids are reading. Here's why we need you. And next steps. And the next step is that the next steps we're going to be coming in to evaluate your educator prep college, because our state board of ed accredits them. So that is going on right as we speak. Right now in Indiana, we're evaluating our educator prep colleges. And I'll tell you, some raised their hand, some who are in this room raised their hand and said, we'll go first, we're ready, we're really good, because we have some great higher eds who are really doing good by educating our teachers. And then we had some who, where I got a call from the president like, hey, our people are really uncomfortable, which I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah.
They should be.
That's right. That's right.
That's happening right now.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple of things. The first one is what gets measured gets done. The accountability piece, small a, in higher ed has been missing. I opened by talking about how we can partner and how they can see themselves in student outcomes. So I think that what gets measured gets done. So as you begin to look more deeply into what's happening in higher education and how they're preparing candidates, because I've heard from a lot of district leaders that prefer that their teachers, their newer teachers, have had their preparation that is aligned to the science of reading, right? That's their preference when they're hiring. So I think it's important also to get that message out. But the other thing that I heard you say is words matter, language matters. Let me tell you something. I don't know if Tennessee is in the room, but in Tennessee's law, you won't see the term science of reading. You'll see foundational skills. Let me tell you, you have to think about your climate. That is a real thing. You have to think about your stakeholders, your climate, what is going to go over well, right? What can be something that we can all get together around the table and agree on? Call it what you want, but as long as we're addressing all of the components of reading and writing and doing this in a way that excludes 3Qing, maybe that's the term we should think about.
Yeah. We'll test that one.
We'll test that one out. Focus group. This is our focus group right here. But yeah, so those things really, really matter. So sometimes, as you're getting your message across or you're building your coalitions, you have to think. Someone said on a call one time before, like when we capitalize science of reading, it makes it seem like it's its own thing, and some people may feel threatened by that. I was like, okay, let's put it in lowercase. I mean, it's things like that.
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, that was just a real thing. So thank you for that. So I'm going to shift now to Arkansas, Dr. Kiffany Pride. We recently met this year, and I'm just so impressed. And I am just, really happy to meet you. She's Arkansas, along with Indiana, Louisiana, Maryland, are part of ExcelinEd's Early Literacy Network. So we have the pleasure of working with state education literacy leaders who are responsible for implementing the state's early literacy policies. So, Arkansas.
Yes.
Arkansas has had policy for a while, too. I think you started with professional development in the science of reading, right, some years ago. But something happened within the last couple of years, the LEARNS Act.
Exactly.
It was over 1,000 pages. So when someone sent it to me, it was like, hey, we need you to review. I was like, you're just going to have to tell me which page number and what line numbers, because this is a lot. It was not just early literacy, but all of the things around policy that really kind of reflect ExcelinEd's policies. That's amazing. But we are so thankful to have Arkansas kind of leading the way on this comprehensive adoption approach. But let's talk a little bit about implementation. So, what set the stage? I know your new governor was a part of it, but what really set the stage for the LEARNS Act in Arkansas, this huge comprehensive law?
Well, wow, yes, it is comprehensive, and thank you for that question. I would say, we had been on a journey in Arkansas for a while, and we said no to 3Qing, I know, 2017, 2018, very early, and really didn't have a lot of pushback. Like, we all were resolute in our, collective effort to make sure our students were reading. We wanted to make sure that our students were achieving the best that they could. So I think for so long we knew that, 3Qing wasn't working, it wasn't reliable, but we weren't seeing the progress that we wanted to see in terms of student achievement numbers, right? We had teachers being trained in cohorts with follow-up coaching. We had, different things going on in all of our regions, and we were all working very hard. So I think just really needing to pull it all together, creating a comprehensive system, starting with our standards, and our secretary is in here. One of the things he said to us when we first got there was like, let's talk about the standards. And it was a needed conversation. Really having clear standards to make sure that our teachers understand the marks at each grade level. Like, what am I supposed to do in this grade level for this student, and then pass it to the next teacher to do it in the next grade level. And really just projecting forward for the students so that they're ready when they leave the K-12 space. So I think just needing to really pull together a comprehensive approach. We had a lot of great pieces. From 27 on, we had the No 3Qing, and if you heard the 6th episode of So the Story, Arkansas was in there for the first, being recognized as the first state to say No 3Qing. So we knew very early on that this was a meaningful journey for us, and that we were going to stick with it. But with our LEARNS legislation, a lot of pieces brought it all together. This idea around instructional coherence, starting with the comprehensive assessment system, really thinking clearly about support for our schools that are struggling by having coaches that are well adept in the science of reading and in implementation. Because it's one thing to know it, right? But also, how do you implement it? How do you actually implement it at grade level and then respond to the needs of students? So I think we have a lot of layers in there that filled gaps that we had, high impact tutoring during the day as well as at the end of the day. So lots of pieces that were needed. We had a good momentum, but we needed these other pieces to fill the gaps so that we could have a comprehensive plan. And that's key. And I think the other thing is leaving nobody behind. We had a P20 space already, but we we strengthen that space, thinking about pre-K all the way to our EPP programs and beyond, because we also have to think about our leadership programs. How are we developing leaders to be able to come out to lead the implementation, whether that's at the district level or state level? No matter the level, do you have the skill set? Do you recognize what skillful implementation of the science of reading really means from every role, and also involving our parents? And so, again, I think the LEARNS Act pulled it all together. We're now focused on, do we have this comprehensive system that leads to coherence and alignment of practices? And so we've been busy for 2 years.
For sure.
And we're still working. Yes.
So we'll talk about this elephant in the room, local control.
Local control.
Anybody? Yeah. Local control. So you have this policy, you have your system in place. What happens when you have districts that say, we have local control? How do you build that kind of trusting relationship, provide that guidance, but also look, y'all, this is law. So this is what we're doing.
I think the key for us is having open communication with the feedback loop, right? Like when it seems like there's not open communication, it can breed suspicion. And so we didn't want to do that. I'll frame it in our high quality instructional initiative. One of the things we wanted to do was to really take our time and to communicate, why do we need high quality instruction materials? Did they have to have it? Yes. But we didn't focus on that. We said, listen, let's really talk about, we all believe that the science of reading is the route to go. And we didn't have big disagreement about that, right? Like, what we had was some people didn't really understand what that meant to implement it, but whether they believed it was the right way was a different thing. So we have a great starting point. And how do we then fold the page or turn the ocean liner, we like to say, is to then say, okay, we all believe in this thing, let's communicate about it, but what's going to help us get where we need to go is we all have high quality instruction materials. Local control is you get to choose which one you're going to use. And so saying you all have a choice. And so I think being open, not breeding suspicion, saying here is your choice. You have choice in the way that you choose materials. We did inform their adoption process. We gave them, if you want a full adoption process, this is what it looks like. You can tweak it to meet your local needs, but I think really just communicating that we're all in this together. It's an interconnected activity. Nobody can be left out of it. Even parents and even students. We say students need to really enjoy and engage in the high quality instruction material. So I think really taking your time to communicate, make sure there's no suspicion there. If people ask you questions, answer those questions.
Yes.
Be honest. Yes, there's law there. Right? Even on the flip side of that, with other things, they'll say, is there a law for me to have math? There's no law there, but let's talk about best practice. Right. And so that just opens the dialogue, and it moves us forward with implementation. And we've been very successful with high quality instruction material in terms of the science of reading. We know that in our K2 space, really in our K5 space, about 98% of our students have access to HQIM. So now we shift our focus to, are we skillfully implementing it? But it's just communicating, having open dialogue, and it has to be a feedback loop, respecting that there is local control. No matter what you do, you have some control of something. And so what is that, and how do you make the best of it for the target, which is our student, right? Making them the center of the conversation.
So are there any school board members or state board of education members in here? Raise your hand. Fantastic. Let me tell you something. This group seems to be really an untapped resource, an untapped group. I was speaking at a conference a few weeks ago, and there was a school board member in my session. And she came up to me and she said, I'm a marriage and family therapist, but I'm being asked to vote on curriculum and assessments and all of these things as it relates to the science of reading. And no one has taken the time to build my knowledge before I vote. So just a point of privilege. Make sure that as we're talking about local control, it's more, make sure that they're informed. Make sure that they understand, this is what's going to be coming before you, but let's take a moment to really kind of discuss what this is, what the implications are, what the impact could be if we don't right? Follow the science or follow the evidence. So I thank you all for being here and for joining in on this conversation with us. So now I'm going to transition to Dr. Brumley of Louisiana. So what's unique about Louisiana, and my heart is full because I've actually helped in all of these processes, so I really appreciate the partnership over time. So Louisiana's approach was a bit different. You achieved a comprehensive policy adopting all of ExcelinEd's 18 fundamental principles, but over a 3-year period. So talk to us a bit about how that went, why that approach, and just what you are up to now in Louisiana.
So I never prepare notes, so may you be blessed by my spontaneity, and may I not be embarrassed by it. Look, I don't want to lose the opportunity. By my estimates, there's approximately 300 people in the room, and so I just want to tell you how amazing Louisiana is. And we are always looking for high-quality individuals at the State Department.
Oh, wait a minute.
We are in Indiana, too.
Hold on.
Dr. Jenner.
Cade. Sorry, not my turn.
We are always
Recruitment
looking.
is alive and well at the National Summit.
Dr. Jenner, you interrupted me, and I don't. We are always looking for high-quality policy impact doers in our state, and so check in on us. We're happy to employ you at the Louisiana Department of Education. Check us out.
No shame at all.
I am honored to be here with an esteemed panel of really smart people, and they have me wondering, as you may be, why I am up here. I am the sum of our team. And so we have a really amazing team at the Louisiana Department of Education doing really great work. I'm proud of that work. I think it's the right work. And I think the students of the state of Louisiana and the state as a whole will benefit from that work. We needed a reading revival in our state. As Dr. Jenner mentioned, results in Indiana, as she alluded, declined over a period of time. Whenever I looked at results in the state of Louisiana, for the decade before my appointment, it was essentially a flat line, and it had plateaued. And that's not acceptable. And so for all of the amazing work of reformers over that decade in areas like public charter schools or HQIM, for reformers, teaching effective reading was not in vogue. And so we decided to put it on the cover page. And we called it out, and we knew that is what we needed to do. And we really began to address the issue. As you mentioned, Dr. Burt, we moved at the speed of change here in a very thoughtful way, in a way in which we believe that our systems and our educators and our parents could absorb and implement that change. And so we really feel that we're in a good place in the way in which we rolled these policies out. And I'll tell you, for us, in many ways, the end piece was the third grade promotion piece, where ending this idea of social promotion that everyone just moves on, even if they're not ready. And so before we got to that point, which this is the first year where third graders in the state of Louisiana, if they can't demonstrate a certain level of reading proficiency at the end of third grade, they will not promote to fourth grade. And so this is the first cohort of students where that will be impacted. But as you mentioned, we've been implementing these policies for a period of years. And the reason I mention that is because I would not feel comfortable from an educative standpoint or a moral standpoint putting those children in that position had we not done everything within our power as a state to prepare them for that moment.
Right.
And so for us, it began with things like making sure every K-3 teacher in the entire state of Louisiana had training on the science of reading. And that's not just a 1-hour workshop. We're talking extensive training on the science of reading. We were able to pass legislation to get us into the colleges of education where we now control their coursework in literacy. We banned 3Qing. And frankly, I don't know what they do in Indiana, but for us, if we find someone not adhering to our 3 queuing law, I have a set of reading rangers that go out and they address this situation.
I feel like we need a word wall. There's been so many great words.
We put in place parent notification. Our students receive a screener 3 times a year, and what's really important about that is not only does it provide teachers information for instructional decisions, it provides policymakers with information for policy decisions, but it provides families information for family decisions. And so we knew also that was important. And so we put in the high-dosage tutoring. We put in so many different opportunities to help the students of the state of Louisiana be prepared for this moment that is coming. And we also knew that we needed to, from a quality control standpoint, make sure that we had accountability for the schools. Mm-hmm. And so we have put in place the first K-2 accountability system as well. And it is 100% based on literacy at this point. So the signal there is, whereas in the past, school principals may send their best teachers to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, the signal now is you can't do that anymore because we're going to call you out on reading outcomes. But it's also important because we're signaling that you need to make sure you're pushing resource into those fundamental grade levels as well. So moving forward, our schools will receive a report card, that A through F letter grade system in K2, and it's completely based on reading proficiency and reading growth. So I feel that we have a really comprehensive set of solutions that are going to benefit Louisiana students. I can tell you on the latest release of NAEP, our reading proficiency is stronger post-pandemic than pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that, no offense to my friends in Indiana, Arkansas, and Maryland,
all
but
right,
Louisiana...
we're going to have to take this outside, sir.
cut her mic. Louisiana led the country in 4th grade reading growth. And guys, we're not done. The students of the state of Louisiana deserve better. Their communities deserve better. And that's why we're pushing the status quo, and we're going to do these things that we think are morally important. I'm just confident that we have to protect our strategy at this point.
Yes.
There was the legislative strategy around development of policy and passage of policy. Now I think in many ways, as we move forward, it's about protection legislatively of these policies.
So I'll say this. There was an article... the years passed me by. I don't know if it was earlier this year or late last year. That was from the Associated Press. And the headline was Literacy Scores Soar in the Deep South. Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi were featured for their gains on NAEP with low-income students. So I just want you to talk just briefly about the way in which we're addressing the literacy crisis, not just nationally, but for those underserved populations that may have historically never seen success before. Just as a nation, we've accepted this achievement gap as like this is just the way it is. But there are spaces and places in this country who are just, we say, looking under the hood, identifying students with disabilities and not making excuses for why they can't improve, identifying our English learners or our low-income students, our black and brown kids, and are really intentionally working to narrow those gaps. So with Louisiana's effort to ensure that they are addressing the needs of low-income students, can you just talk a bit about that and your focus and your efforts on that?
So I think every student deserves the right to equal access to opportunity to be successful, whatever that may look like. And look, this is a question I get in many forms, whether I'm at a local Lions Club or a Rotary or a Chamber of Commerce. What about students that have historically not achieved at the mark that is needed? Mm-hmm. And I, the answer to me is pretty simple here. Is for the first time ever in our state, we actually know this. We know because of our screeners, the students, and we know them by name, and we know what their strengths are. We know what their opportunities might be. And so through a combination of tutoring services, intervention opportunities, training across the board, I think we're in a much better place to be able to address those individual needs of every individual student. And then the other piece, and again, I know it's not popular, and you've talked a little bit about little a. I think big A matters here. Big A matters, and making sure that schools are held accountable for the results they are producing. And that doesn't mean you say, school, go over there, go do your thing, and we're going to judge you, okay, and we're going to shine a light on you, and we're going to illuminate you. It means you set a standard. You provide the support, you provide resources, you provide help, you provide grace. But at the end of the day, the job is the job.
That's right.
And if we are educators and we are professional educators, we believe that every student academically can grow year over year. There's been a lot of talk about HQIM. HQIM is super important. Having high-quality resource in front of every student is important, especially whenever we're talking about student groups that may not have exceeded to the extent that they should have previously had that opportunity. But HQIM in and of itself is not enough. You also have to have effective educators to deliver the HQIM. And so if you're simply focused on HQIM, that's only half the piece at best. You have to invest in educator development to make sure that they can effectively implement. So you have the blending of the art and the science of the pedagogy.
Thank you. So before we open it up for Q&A, I want each of you to just kind of give your final thoughts on your literacy journey. So what you have here on this panel is a state like Maryland that has recently adopted their comprehensive policy through their State Board of Education, and they are beginning implementation. So at the beginning stages, but they've already worked really, really hard to develop some things, a coaching framework, which is great. You should go to their website to look at that. You have like Arkansas that has had policies in place for a while and now have done this great comprehensive approach. You have Louisiana that has adopted over years, and they have also been really in the trenches in implementation. And of course, you have, Indiana, right? And so I do want to start with Dr. Jenner with Indiana's approach for strengthening, just really kind of taking a look at what was happening and strengthening what you have there. What are your final thoughts, key takeaways for those who are in this room who may be representative of each of these experiences that sit here on the panel?
So,
and no jabs at
listen, I have it ready to fire. Don't stop me now. No, one of the reflections, just sitting here listening to Arkansas, Louisiana, Maryland, your work in Mississippi is we each, as states, most certainly want to win, and we should keep that competitive spirit up. But when each of our boats go up, so does the water level for our country. And I don't know about you all, but one thing that does keep me up at night a bit is I know, and we have some of our board members and legislators and advocates in the room. I know how hard we're working. I know how hard you all are working. But we have some states in our country that just aren't coming to the table much on talking about student learning. And we're all one nation under God. And so we've got to keep pushing each other, supporting each other, learning from each other, and jabbing each other to keep getting better for our country and our individual states. That's a reflection that I've had as I have deep respect for each of these people and their leadership.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tiffany?
Yeah, I would say one of the common things that we've all talked about is really about our support structure. And I think that matters a lot. To your point is, this, sometimes you look at this as we need to lead this, but you also need to walk beside people in implementation. And I think one of the things we've learned in Arkansas is that we pretty much can tell you about every school. Like, I can call on anybody on my team and say, hey, what about the school? We can give you detailed information because we're out there with them. Like, this is a shared journey. It has to be shared knowledge. I mean, we're all sharing policy, right? That's there. We have it. But the shared knowledge building through your professional learning, there are, criteria around resources. We know what's going to hold up to help new teachers that come in non-traditional paths, like really understanding all of the pieces and being in there with them and knowing what it is that they need. And so I would say, that's the way to connect and to really see change happen. I can tell lots of stories of districts that, I could have sent somebody to go work with them, but I know that they needed me to come, right? Mm-hmm. Or I know when one of my team members need to go. So it's a shared experience, really understanding the needs of your groups that you're working with, whether that's a region, whether that's an EPP, but really being able to do the work with them and building that shared knowledge and shared structure of support. It matters to them, and that's what moves them to action. And as you say, we're going to be resolute and we're going to keep pushing, but we have to humanize this as well and really understand that we need each other to do it. And so we have that kind of interconnectedness in our state where we're really moving forward. And I'm learning a lot here too from everybody else about how to continue to make this journey a journey that we're gonna eventually make sure that all of our students are where they need to be. So.
Dr. Roman?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't recall the question, but if you're looking for a job, the Louisiana Department of Education.
Listen, where are my ExcelinEd people?
No.
Not next year. He'll be in the office.
So look, what gives me comfort in this is knowing that I have a team of individuals that are committed to this work every single day. So if you're in a position where you're informing staff structure in some type of way or policy in some type of way, make sure you have individuals that are completely focused on literacy throughout the entire course of the day. So, there are things that happen when you're in a leadership position that could take your mind away from literacy for a moment. But I have comfort in knowing I have people that they are fully committed to doing that work every second of every day, not just from a policy standpoint, but from an implementation and support standpoint. So what I want to call out to you all is making sure that you are staffed for this work, yes, and you are protecting these individuals from other political ramifications that could exist or politics as it could exist, so that they can focus on literacy instruction across their body of work every single day. And again, I just want to close on saying, look, for all the good reform work that happened for a decade, again, HQIM, expansion of public charters, literacy was not in vogue. You have to put it on the cover page, and you have to make it important. So to the extent that you can go back and you can call it out and you can do something about it, do that.
Thank you. And I'll end with you, Fran.
Okay. Well, since you recruited, Maryland is also looking.
Wait a minute.
If this is a recruitment stage, I need to know. So we are looking, and please call me. You can find me on the app. Okay. I would just like to close to say everybody knows that Dr. Carrie Wright is hyper-focused on literacy, and she did not come to Maryland to fail, and neither did I. And we want to ensure that all of our kiddos in Maryland have access to high-quality instruction, access to high-quality teaching, learning, and their teachers are prepared. So we're looking for ways to shore up. We're always looking. We're leveraging our philanthropic donations. We're leveraging our legislative allocations. We're looking for multiple avenues to get the work done. I can't say it enough that I've been here in Maryland since January, and the speed by which we've moved is sort of mind-numbing, but it's good work. And I learned so much from coming to places like this and networking with people, these smart people who are sitting here next to me, and I feel so just in awe. But I'm so thankful to be here and know that while we made the Mississippi Miracle, the Mississippi Marathon happen, the Maryland momentum is well underway.
Well, all right. Okay. Okay, so we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, I know there's a microphone here, which might be the only one. And before you ask your question, shout out to philanthropy, shout out to our philanthropic organizations that support this work, that have really just put their heart and soul and money into moving their states forward. So thank you so much for your support. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Madeleine Takur from the Children's Movement of Florida. And one thing that we know in our state is that the numbers for kindergarten readiness are roughly equal to the numbers of third grade reading, and that the foundation of literacy is language, which is formed in those first 5 years. Can any of you comment on partnerships with the 0 to 3 years or the pre-K space and how that plays into your early literacy strategy?
That's a great question.
I'll talk a little bit about. I know in Arkansas we were. Can y'all hear me? Okay, in my paper. I'll just say we recognize that kindergarten readiness is essential to the success of our students in kindergarten. So we've really thought deeply about how we can build cohorts of training for our pre-K teachers, and we started that early on. I used to have pre-K, I don't have any more, but I still support pre-K and do what I can to make sure that the efforts are going forward. But we started cohorts of teachers and incentivized them around learning the science of reading in the space that makes sense in pre-K. And so we partnered with a vendor. We got teachers trained. They were also trained in letters, and we just built those cohorts over time. And so there's still momentum there, and leading pre-K centers that are really demonstrating what it means to be very conscientious in preparing our pre-K students for kindergarten. So Tanya Williams is the person in our state, but I'm happy to engage with you with that.
So I'll probably get in trouble for this one, but so we also oversee early child care in the state of Louisiana, which are all the birth to 4 centers. So we have K-12 plus early care. One of the things that we're noticing, and our team is really engaged in these conversations as of recent, is whenever we're looking at kindergarten readiness numbers, we are seeing alarming numbers and alarming data in terms of kindergarten readiness. But what we believe to also be true is the work in which we're engaged with those early care centers is more about interaction and engagement between the teacher and the children. And we don't think that there is enough emphasis on literacy development at a developmentally appropriate level. And so what we are going to start looking at, and we're not here yet, I've scheduled a meeting for this with our team for just next week, is we need to begin looking at, with the early care centers, what shifts can we make in big A and little a accountability there to make sure that they are putting the emphasis on developmentally appropriate language development with the children, so that those numbers that we begin to see in kindergarten are higher and are helping to put those children in a better position for success. Because with our literacy work, we're seeing cohorts grow year over year from K to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. It's a result of all the efforts that have been discussed today. But those kindergarten readiness numbers are increasingly alarming. And so I think we have policy work to do there, and we're beginning that exploration.
Thank you. Next question.
Yes. My name is Brett Tingley. I'm with Parents for Reading Justice. And I was wondering, you're talking about parents and leveraging all the partners and talking about commitment of your staff. Parents are the most committed because they're, especially dyslexic parents, their kids are struggling to read. So we are helping parents to really make an impact. And so my question to you is, could you leverage parents more? One of the innovative things we've done in Ohio, and talk about soul to story, we got a lot of issues in Ohio with our higher ed, which we believe is the root of the problem. If you grassroots organize, flip a district to the science of reading, then you take your district in to provide customer feedback to that College of Education. And you say, we're not using 3Qing. We're spending too much on professional development. We need you guys to do that. And if you don't do that, we're going to prioritize our hiring to other colleges that do. What you do is you set the market forces in place to make it a workforce issue and make it a business issue, which is what drives this. So has that been anything that you all have done?
Thank you for your
So just, you're exactly right. We have to do more to engage parents and families. And there's never been such a time as this. Parents and families are really actively interested in education topics. And it is, as Cade mentioned, kind of what you put on the cover. And so I jotted down a couple of things. Number one, there's some you can do from the state level and some that should really be done at the local level. So from the state level, we have a 24/7 learning lab. Started out just to serve teachers and educators, but we got so much feedback from parents that they wanted to help that we now have a parent arm specifically. At the school level and the community level, I think this is almost more important. Some of the feedback we're getting from parents and families is, I don't understand that XYZ vendor report and what it means for my kid. I mean, I see that they're not totally making it, but what does that mean? And more importantly, what can I do? It seems like that's something that we're talking about in Indiana. It seems like that's something that we absolutely could improve on because it starts at that local connection, and we have many parents and families who are eager to help. We've just got to give them the tools and a keep it simple method that they can join us in supporting their child. I think we've got to do more.
Thank you, and I'm so sorry, but that was our cue for time. But thank you all so much for attending this session and for your support of earlyliteracymatters.org. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get him.